The evening sun cast long shadows across the bustling streets of downtown as a modest Honda Civic pulled into the parking lot of Le Petit Jardin, one of the city's most talked-about French restaurants. The couple inside the car looked at each other nervously. It was their wedding anniversary, and they had been saving up for months to dine at this establishment. The wife, a dedicated elementary school teacher, smoothed down her simple blue dress, while her husband, a hard-working construction supervisor, adjusted his tie, the same one he had worn to their wedding 5 years ago. They weren't used to fancy restaurants, preferring the comfortable diners where everybody knew their names, but tonight was special. As they approached the ornate entrance, the maitre d' gave them a questioning look, his eyes traveling from their modest attire to their intertwined hands. The restaurant owner, Mr. Pierre, who happened to be at the front desk, immediately stepped forward, his expression turning from neutral to disdainful. "Do you have a reservation?" he asked, his voice dripping with condescension. The husband pulled out his phone, showing the confirmation email he had received 3 weeks ago. "Ah, yes," Mr. Pierre said, glancing at the screen. "Unfortunately, we are experiencing some technical difficulties with our kitchen equipment. Perhaps you would be more comfortable at the diner down the street?" The couple exchanged glances, understanding perfectly what was happening. They could see other patrons being seated, the kitchen clearly functioning without any issues. The wife's eyes welled up with tears, but she held them back, standing straight and dignified. "Sir," the husband began politely, "we made this reservation weeks ago. We can see your kitchen is working fine. Is there another reason you don't want to serve us?" His voice was calm but firm, garnering attention from nearby diners who had started to notice the uncomfortable exchange. "Mr. Pierre's face reddened slightly, but he maintained his haughty demeanor. "This is a high-end establishment," he said, lowering his voice. "We have certain standards to maintain. I'm sure you understand." He gestured towards the door, making it clear they weren't welcome. What Mr. Pierre didn't know was that the couple he was turning away weren't just any ordinary pair. The husband had recently been appointed to the city's restaurant licensing board, while his wife sat on the district's education foundation, which regularly organized charity galas and events at various upscale venues across the city. More importantly, they were beloved figures in their community. The wife had been named Teacher of the Year for her work with underprivileged children, and her husband had made headlines for organizing a successful program that provided job training and employment opportunities in the construction industry for at-risk youth. As they turned to leave, several other diners who had witnessed the scene stood up in solidarity. A well-dressed elderly woman approached them, her voice carrying across the now silent restaurant. "I've been coming here for 20 years, she announced, "but after witnessing this disgraceful behavior, I won't be returning." She removed her coat from her chair and headed for the door, followed by several other patrons. The story might have ended there, with yet another instance of discrimination swept under the rug, but fate had other plans. Among the departing customers was a local food blogger with over 100,000 followers, who had been there to review the restaurant. She had captured the entire exchange on her phone, and by midnight, the video would begin its journey across social media, carrying with it a story that would shake the local restaurant scene to its core. As the couple drove home, they weren't angry, they were determined. This wasn't just about them anymore. It was about everyone who had ever been judged based on appearances, about every person who had been made to feel less worthy because they didn't fit someone else's notion of acceptable. Little did Mr. Pierre know, his actions that evening would set in motion a chain of events that would change not only his restaurant's future but also the way the entire city viewed discrimination in public spaces. The wife squeezed her husband's hand as they pulled into their driveway. "Happy anniversary," she said with a slight smile. "I think we have some work to do." He nodded, already forming a plan in his mind. This story was far from over, in fact, it was just beginning. The video of the incident at Le Petit Jardin spread like wildfire across social media platforms. By the next morning, the food blogger's post had garnered hundreds of thousands of views, with comments pouring in from people sharing their own similar experiences at various establishments. The couple's dignity in the face of such blatant discrimination struck a chord with viewers, though their identities remained unknown to the public. The husband sat at their kitchen table the next morning, sipping coffee and reading through emails on his tablet. As a member of the restaurant licensing board, he had already received several messages from his colleagues about the viral video. None of them had recognized him in the footage, as the blogger had been careful to protect the couple's privacy, but the incident had caught the board's attention for all the right reasons. "Have you seen the comments?" his wife asked, placing a plate of toast between them. She had spent the morning responding to parent emails and preparing for her class, trying to maintain normalcy despite the previous night's events. "People are organizing a protest outside the restaurant for this weekend." He nodded, scrolling through his phone. "The Restaurant Association is calling for an emergency meeting this afternoon." Apparently, this isn't the first complaint about Le Petit Jardin. They've received several reports of discriminatory practices over the past year, but nothing this public. Their conversation was interrupted by a call from the Education Foundation's chairperson. The foundation had been planning their annual fundraising gala, and Le Petit Jardin had been one of the venues under consideration. The chairperson was horrified to learn that one of their most valued board members had been treated so poorly. Meanwhile, across town, Mr. Pierre was facing the consequences of his actions. The restaurant's phone had been ringing non-stop with cancellations. Their social media pages were flooded with negative comments, and several food critics had published scathing articles about the establishment's discriminatory practices. His chef, a talented culinary artist who had worked in restaurants around the world, called an emergency staff meeting. "I cannot work in a place that treats people this way," she announced, her voice firm. "Either things change, or I leave." Several other staff members nodded in agreement, their faces showing a mix of disappointment and resolve. Mr. Pierre tried to defend himself, claiming his actions were about maintaining the restaurant's atmosphere, but his words fell flat. His manager pulled him aside, showing him the mounting financial implications. 3 corporate events had already cancelled their reservations, and their regular weekend bookings were dropping rapidly. Back in their community, the couple's influence was quietly making waves. The wife's students' parents, many of whom were influential business owners and professionals, had recognized her in the video. Word spread through PTA meetings and school functions about the beloved teacher's experience. The husband's construction company, known for its community outreach programs, received numerous calls from other businesses wanting to show their support. His workforce, diverse and tight-knit, began sharing their own stories of discrimination, leading to meaningful discussions about change in the workplace. By midweek, local news stations had picked up the story. They focused not just on the incident, but on the larger issue of discrimination in the service industry. Restaurant workers from across the city began coming forward with their own experiences, both as employees and customers. The food blogger who had captured the video found herself at the center of a movement. She organized a social media campaign highlighting inclusive restaurants in the city, particularly those owned by minorities or known for their welcoming atmosphere. The response was overwhelming, with people sharing their positive experiences and recommending establishments that treated everyone with dignity. Mr. Pierre attempted to salvage the situation by releasing a carefully worded apology statement, but its corporate tone and lack of genuine remorse only fueled the public's anger. The contrast between his cold statement and the couple's graceful handling of the situation couldn't have been starker. The Restaurant Licensing Board scheduled a special hearing to address discrimination in the industry. The husband knew he would need to recuse himself from any direct decisions about Le Petit Jardin, but he could still influence positive change in the industry as a whole. He began drafting proposals for mandatory sensitivity training and clear anti-discrimination policies for all licensed establishments. His wife, meanwhile, turned the experience into a teaching moment for her students. Without mentioning her personal involvement, she led discussions about kindness, acceptance, and standing up for what's right. Her students, with their innocent wisdom, offered solutions that often put adults to shame. Maybe the restaurant owner just needs to sit and have dinner with different kinds of people, one student suggested. My mom says you can't hate someone when you share food with them. The simple observation brought tears to her eyes, reminding her why she loved teaching so much. As the week progressed, the couple received an unexpected call from the elderly woman who had walked out of the restaurant in solidarity with them. She turned out to be a retired civil rights attorney, and she offered her support in ensuring lasting change would come from this incident. The story had grown beyond a single evening of discrimination. It had become a catalyst for a larger conversation about inclusion, respect, and the power of community. As part 2 of this unfolding drama came to a close, it was clear that Mr. Pierre's actions had inadvertently sparked a movement that would reshape the city's dining scene forever. As the weekend approached, the situation at Le Petit Jardin had reached a critical point. The restaurant's reservations had plummeted to less than 20% of their usual numbers, and Mr. Pierre was facing mounting pressure from his investors. The protest planned for Saturday was gaining momentum, with local community groups and civil rights organizations announcing their participation. The husband and wife had maintained their silence about their identities, choosing instead to work through official channels. The restaurant licensing board had convened an emergency session to discuss the implementation of new anti-discrimination guidelines. The husband sat quietly during these meetings, his personal experience adding weight to his carefully worded suggestions for reform. It's not just about punitive measures, he explained to his colleagues. We need to create incentives for restaurants to actively promote inclusive environments. His proposal included tax incentives for establishments that implemented comprehensive staff training programs and maintained diverse hiring practices. Meanwhile, the wife's school had become an unexpected hub of community action. Parents, learning of her experience through the viral video, organized a fundraising dinner to support local businesses that championed diversity. The event would feature food from family-owned restaurants across the city, celebrating the community's rich cultural tapestry. Mr. Pierre's chef had made good on her threat to leave, taking half of the kitchen staff with her. She announced plans to open her own restaurant, one that would celebrate diversity through both its menu and its welcome all atmosphere. Local investors, impressed by her stance against discrimination, were already lining up to support her venture. The elderly civil rights attorney who had witnessed the incident had been busy too. She had compiled a detailed report of similar incidents at Le Petit Jardin, working with the food blogger to document patterns of discrimination. Their findings were troubling. Dozens of potential customers had been turned away over the past year using similar excuses about technical difficulties or lost reservations. The protest day arrived with unexpected developments. As demonstrators gathered outside Le Petit Jardin, carrying signs promoting equality and inclusion, something remarkable happened inside the restaurant. The remaining staff, led by the maitre d', who had witnessed the original incident, staged their own protest. They arrived at work wearing buttons that read, "Service with Dignity," and informed Mr. Pierre they would only continue working if significant changes were made. "We've been complicit in this behavior for too long," the maitre d' declared, his voice trembling but determined. "We got into this business to serve people, to create memorable experiences, not to judge and exclude." His words, captured on video by a customer, quickly joined the growing collection of viral content surrounding the incident. The couple watched these developments from home, their anniversary dinner now a distant memory replaced by a movement they had never intended to start. Their phone rang with a surprising call. The city's mayor wanted to meet with them. The meeting was arranged for Monday morning at City Hall. The wife's students had created a beautiful mural in their classroom, depicting people of all backgrounds sharing meals together. "Food brings people together," they wrote in childish handwriting across the top. The image was shared on the school's social media, catching the attention of local artists who proposed creating a similar mural downtown. Back at Le Petit Jardin, Mr. Pierre finally began to understand the magnitude of his actions. His restaurant, once the pride of the city's dining scene, had become a symbol of outdated prejudices. The weight of his choices pressed heavily on his shoulders as he watched his life's work crumbling around him. That Sunday evening, he made an unprecedented move. Instead of releasing another corporate statement, he invited the food blogger who had filmed the original incident to meet with him. The conversation, which she live-streamed with his permission, was raw and honest. "I was wrong," he admitted, his voice heavy with emotion. "I've spent so many years believing that exclusivity meant excellence. I forgot that true hospitality means welcoming everyone." His words were met with skepticism by many viewers, but some saw sincerity in his humility. The couple received news of this development while preparing for their meeting with the mayor. They discussed it over dinner, this time at home, sharing a simple but loving meal they had cooked together. The wife picked at her food thoughtfully. "People can change," she said, thinking of her students and how they learned from their mistakes. "But change needs to be more than words." Her husband nodded, already drafting ideas for how the restaurant licensing board could ensure meaningful reforms. The story had evolved from a single act of discrimination into a citywide conversation about inclusion and change. Local business schools requested to use the case study in their ethics classes. Restaurant owners across the city began reviewing their policies and practices, eager to avoid similar controversies. As Part 3 drew to a close, the couple prepared for their meeting at City Hall, knowing that their response to this situation would set the tone for future changes. They had never sought the spotlight, but now found themselves in a position to effect real change. Their anniversary dinner might have been ruined, but something far more meaningful had emerged from its ashes, a chance to make their city a more welcoming place for everyone. Monday morning arrived with an air of anticipation as the couple made their way to City Hall. The morning news had already picked up on the scheduled meeting, with reporters gathering outside the building's historic steps. The husband adjusted his tie, a new one this time, a gift from his construction crew who had insisted he needed it for such an important occasion. Inside the mayor's office, they found not just the mayor, but a diverse group of community leaders, restaurant owners, and civil rights advocates. The meeting, it turned out, wasn't just about their incident at Le Petit Jardin, it was about transforming the city's approach to business equality. "Your experience," the mayor began, "has opened our eyes to a problem that's been simmering beneath the surface for far too long." She gestured to the assembled group. "We've gathered some of our city's finest minds to draft a comprehensive plan for change." The wife shared her perspective first, speaking not just as the victim of discrimination, but as an educator. "In my classroom, we teach children that everyone deserves respect. Yet, when they step into the adult world, they often see something very different." Her words resonated with everyone present, particularly the other business owners who shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The husband then presented the restaurant licensing board's preliminary proposals for reform. His suggestions included regular cultural sensitivity audits, a clear reporting system for discrimination complaints, and incentives for businesses that demonstrated exceptional inclusive practices. The mayor's team took copious notes, already seeing the potential for expanding these ideas beyond just the restaurant industry. Meanwhile, across town, Le Petit Jardin was undergoing its own transformation. Mr. Pierre, following his public admission of wrongdoing, had spent the weekend in lengthy discussions with his remaining staff. The maitre d', who had worked in the restaurant industry for over 2 decades, shared stories of countless subtle discriminations he had witnessed but never challenged. "We need to be part of the solution," the maitre d' insisted, spreading out a proposal he had drafted. His plan included complete staff retraining, community outreach programs, and a monthly event series celebrating diverse culinary traditions. Mr. Pierre, his usual authority diminished by recent events, found himself listening with newfound humility. The former chef, who had left in protest, was making waves of her own. Her plans for a new restaurant had evolved into something bigger, a culinary incubator program that would provide opportunities for aspiring chefs from underrepresented communities. The announcement of her project had attracted attention from successful restaurateurs across the country who wanted to support her vision. Back at City Hall, the meeting had expanded beyond its original scope. The wife's school district superintendent, who had joined the discussion, proposed integrating restaurant industry professionals into school career days, emphasizing the importance of inclusive business practices to the next generation. Local business leaders pledged support for internship programs targeting diverse young talent. The food blogger, who had been invited to document the meeting, found herself becoming part of the story she was covering. Her thoughtful coverage of the unfolding events had earned her respect from both traditional media and her growing social media following. She was offered a regular column in the city's premier newspaper to cover issues of food culture and social justice. As the meeting progressed, the elderly civil rights attorney who had stood up for the couple at Le Petit Jardin presented her findings. The documented patterns of discrimination she had uncovered weren't limited to one restaurant. Subtle forms of exclusion were prevalent throughout the city's high-end dining scene. What we need, she argued, is not just policy change, but cultural change. Her presentation included testimonials from dozens of people who had faced similar treatment but had never reported it, believing nothing would change. The room fell silent as these stories were shared, each one a powerful reminder of why their current efforts were so crucial. The wife's students, though not present at the meeting, had made their own contribution. They had created a video, filmed during their lunch break, showing their vision of what an inclusive restaurant should look like. Their innocent yet profound insights brought tears to many eyes in the room, reminding everyone why they were there. As the meeting drew to a close, the mayor made an unexpected announcement. The city would establish a new Office of Business Equality, dedicated to ensuring fair treatment in all customer-facing businesses. The couple was invited to serve on its advisory board, their experience and professional backgrounds making them ideal candidates to help shape its direction. Mr. Pierre, who had requested to address the gathering via video call, spoke last. His demeanor was markedly different from the arrogant restaurant owner who had turned the couple away. He announced that Le Petit Jardin would close for a month of comprehensive reorganization and staff training. When it reopened, it would do so with a new mission and a new name, chosen through a community contest. As the couple left City Hall that afternoon, they found themselves surrounded by reporters eager for comments. Instead of shying away, they decided to speak up, knowing their words could help others facing similar situations. "This isn't about one restaurant or one incident," the husband said, his arm around his wife's shoulders. "It's about creating a city where everyone feels welcome, whether they're celebrating a special occasion or just grabbing a quick meal." Part 4 concluded with the story gaining national attention. News outlets across the country began examining similar issues in their own cities, and restaurant associations nationwide started reaching out to learn more about the proposed reforms. What had started as a ruined anniversary dinner was catalyzing change far beyond their city's boundaries. As news of the city's initiative spread, the story took unexpected turns that no one could have predicted. The couple's message resonated far beyond their local community, inspiring similar movements in cities across the country. Their inbox filled with messages from people sharing their own experiences and asking for advice on creating change in their communities. The wife's elementary school became an unexpected hub of innovation in teaching inclusion. Her students' video about their ideal restaurant had gone viral, catching the attention of a major educational publisher. They approached her about developing a curriculum that would teach children about business ethics and inclusion through real-world examples. "Children understand fairness better than adults sometimes," she explained during a teacher training session. "They see the simple truth, that everyone deserves to be treated with kindness." Her colleagues were implementing similar lessons in their own classrooms, creating a ripple effect throughout the school district. The husband's construction company had taken on a special project, renovating the space for the former chef's new restaurant and culinary training center. His crew worked with particular pride, knowing they were part of something bigger than just another building job. Local suppliers, hearing about the project, offered materials at reduced costs to support the initiative. Meanwhile, Le Petit Jardin's transformation was underway. Mr. Pierre had taken the unprecedented step of temporarily stepping down from day-to-day operations, allowing a diversity consultant to oversee the restaurant's reorganization. The maitre d' had been promoted to general manager, his years of experience and recent stance for equality making him the perfect choice to lead the establishment's new chapter. The restaurant's renovation went beyond just staff training and policy changes. The physical space was being redesigned to be more welcoming and accessible. The formerly stuffy interior was being transformed into a warm, inviting space that honored the restaurant's French heritage while embracing modern inclusivity. The community contest to rename the restaurant had generated unexpected enthusiasm. Thousands of suggestions poured in, each accompanied by thoughtful explanations. The winning name would be announced at a special reopening event, where the proceeds would benefit local culinary education programs for underprivileged youth. The elderly civil rights attorney had turned her investigation into a comprehensive report titled Dining with Dignity. The document, which detailed patterns of discrimination in the restaurant industry, became required reading for business license applicants. She worked closely with the new Office of Business Equality to develop practical guidelines for preventing discriminatory practices. The food blogger's influence continued to grow. Her coverage of the unfolding events had earned her a book deal, chronicling not just the incident at Le Petit Jardin, but the larger movement it had inspired. She interviewed restaurant workers, owners, and customers across the city, weaving their stories into a powerful narrative about transformation and social justice. The couple's anniversary dinner, though ruined, had sparked something remarkable. Local restaurants began offering special, unity dinners, where people from different backgrounds could share meals and stories. These events became so popular that they spread to other cities, creating spaces for meaningful conversations and connections. The former chef's culinary training center was taking shape. She had received applications from aspiring chefs across the country, each eager to be part of her innovative program. Major restaurant groups had pledged to offer internships to her graduates, creating a pipeline for diverse talent to enter the industry at all levels. Mr. Pierre, watching these developments from the sidelines, underwent his own transformation. He spent time visiting other restaurants, particularly those owned by immigrants and minorities, learning about their struggles and successes. These experiences humbled him, showing him the richness of culinary traditions he had previously dismissed. The mayor's Office of Business Equality became a model for other cities. They developed a certification program for businesses that demonstrated exceptional commitment to inclusive practices. The certification became a badge of honor, with customers actively seeking out certified establishments. The wife students continued to inspire change in their own way. They organized a multicultural food festival at their school, where families shared traditional recipes and stories. The event was so successful that other schools in the district began planning similar celebrations. During this time, the couple received an invitation that left them speechless. A renowned national civil rights organization wanted to honor them at their annual gala. They were hesitant at first, preferring to work behind the scenes, but realized their story could inspire others to speak up against discrimination. Sometimes the smallest moments create the biggest changes, the wife reflected during a quiet evening at home. They had recently celebrated their anniversary again, this time at a small family-owned restaurant that had earned the city's new equality certification. The meal wasn't fancy, but the warmth and genuine hospitality made it perfect. As Part 5 drew to a close, the ripple effects of that fateful evening continued to spread. What started as an act of discrimination had transformed into a movement for change, touching lives far beyond the walls of one restaurant. The story served as a powerful reminder that when people stand up for what's right, even in small ways, they can create waves of positive change that impact entire communities. 6 months had passed since that fateful evening at Le Petit Jardin, and the changes throughout the city were remarkable. The day of the restaurant's grand reopening arrived, marked by anticipation and a sense of community transformation. The line outside stretched around the block, not just because of curiosity, but because people wanted to be part of this historic moment. The winning name for the renovated restaurant was revealed: La Table de Two, everyone's table. The simple yet powerful name had been suggested by one of the wife's students, whose family had faced similar discrimination at other establishments. The young student stood proudly beside the new sign as local news cameras captured the moment. Inside, the restaurant had been completely transformed. Gone were the stuffy, intimidating interiors, replaced by warm colors and comfortable seating. The walls featured photographs of local families, restaurant staff, and community events, telling the story of the city's diverse culinary heritage. The menu had been reimagined to include classic French dishes alongside fusion creations that celebrated various cultural influences. The former chef, who had left in protest months ago, returned as a special guest for the opening night. Her own culinary training center was thriving, with its first class of students set to graduate in the coming weeks. She and Mr. Pierre shared an emotional moment of reconciliation, their public handshake symbolizing the possibility of genuine change. The husband's work on the restaurant licensing board had led to groundbreaking changes. The new guidelines they had developed were being adopted by cities across the country. Restaurant owners who had initially resisted the changes were now seeing the benefits. Their businesses were growing as they welcomed a more diverse clientele. The wife's curriculum about inclusion and business ethics had been picked up by schools nationwide. She received countless letters from teachers sharing how their students were taking the lessons home, encouraging their parents to think differently about their own biases. One parent wrote, "My daughter now asks me to try restaurants I would have never considered before, and she's teaching me something new about acceptance every day." The elderly civil rights attorney had become a regular fixture at La Table de Two, hosting monthly dinners where people could discuss their experiences and ideas for further progress. These gatherings attracted a diverse mix of community members, from business owners to activists, all sharing meals and perspectives. The food blogger's book was set to launch, with pre-orders exceeding expectations. She had dedicated a chapter to the transformation of Le Petit Jardin into La Table de Two, using it as a case study for how businesses could turn criticism into opportunity. Advanced reviews praised her balanced approach, showing both the challenges and possibilities of institutional change. Mr. Pierre, who had once been the face of discrimination, had become an unlikely advocate for inclusion. He spoke at business conferences about his journey, sharing painful truths about his own prejudices and the cost of maintaining them. "I thought I was protecting my restaurant's reputation," he would say, "but I was actually destroying it by excluding the very people who make our city special." The maitre d', now general manager, had implemented innovative training programs that other restaurants were eager to copy. New staff members were paired with community mentors who helped them understand the importance of creating welcoming spaces for all customers. The program was so successful that the city's restaurant association made it part of their standard training recommendations. The couple's story had inspired a documentary filmmaker, who spent months following the ripple effects of their experience throughout the city. The resulting film, titled A Seat at the Table, was selected for several film festivals, bringing their message of transformation to an even wider audience. The wife's school had become a model for innovative education about inclusion. Students regularly participated in cultural exchange programs with other schools, sharing meals and stories that broke down barriers from an early age. The superintendent called it the most effective anti-bias program we've ever implemented. The husband's construction company had seen unexpected growth, as their commitment to equality attracted clients who shared their values. They began specializing in renovating restaurants to be more accessible and welcoming, turning their experience with La Table de Two into a unique business opportunity. The Office of Business Equality had certified over 100 local establishments, creating a network of businesses committed to inclusive practices. They developed a mobile app that helped customers find certified businesses, making it easier for people to support establishments that shared their values. The city's annual food festival, once dominated by high-end restaurants, had been transformed into a true celebration of community. Street vendors, family restaurants, and fine dining establishments stood side by side, their offerings representing the full spectrum of the city's culinary traditions. One evening, as the couple dined at La Table de Two to celebrate the 6-month anniversary of its reopening, they found themselves seated next to a young couple celebrating their own anniversary. The wife overheard them talking about how comfortable they felt, how welcome. She squeezed her husband's hand under the table, tears in her eyes. The story had come full circle, but its impact continued to grow. Other cities began sending representatives to study their model of community transformation. The couple received invitations to speak at conferences, share their experience with other communities, and help develop similar programs across the country. As Part 6 concluded, the movement they had inadvertently started showed no signs of slowing down. La Table de Two had become more than just a restaurant, it was a symbol of how communities could transform when people stood up for what was right. The couple's ruined anniversary dinner had become a catalyst for change that would impact generations to come. 1 year had passed since the incident that changed everything. The city was preparing for a special celebration, the first annual Unity in Hospitality Week, an event that had grown from the seeds of conflict at Le Petit Jardin. The couple found themselves at the center of festivities they had never imagined creating. La Table de Two had become a landmark of sorts, attracting visitors from across the country who wanted to see how a restaurant could reinvent itself. Tour buses would slow down as guides pointed out the place where a small act of discrimination had sparked a nationwide movement. But inside, it was simply a wonderful place to eat, where the food was as warm as the welcome. The former chef's culinary training center was celebrating its first graduating class. 25 students from diverse backgrounds, each with a story of overcoming barriers, were ready to enter the industry with not just culinary skills but a deep understanding of how to create inclusive spaces. Major restaurants across the country were competing to hire these graduates, recognizing the unique perspective they brought to the kitchen. The wife's educational program had evolved beyond her wildest dreams. What started as classroom discussions about fairness had grown into a comprehensive curriculum being used in schools across 3 states. She had taken a sabbatical to help train other teachers, sharing methods for using food and hospitality as tools for teaching inclusion. Children understand hospitality instinctively, she explained during a teacher training session. They know that sharing food is about sharing love. We're just helping them hold on to that wisdom as they grow. Her students' original video about their ideal restaurant had been viewed millions of times, inspiring similar projects in schools worldwide. The husband's work on the restaurant licensing board had earned national recognition. The Department of Justice had reached out to study their certification program as a model for preventing discrimination in public accommodations. He found himself traveling to Washington, D.C., presenting their findings to congressional committees interested in strengthening civil rights protections. The elderly civil rights attorney had compiled her years of experience, including the Le Petit Jardin case, into a groundbreaking legal handbook for addressing discrimination in public spaces. Law schools added it to their curriculum, and civil rights organizations distributed it to communities nationwide. Her monthly dinners at La Table de Two had spawned similar gatherings in restaurants across the country. Mr. Pierre, continuing his journey of transformation, had become an unexpected ally in the fight against discrimination. He traveled to restaurant industry conferences, sharing his story with brutal honesty. "I was the problem," he would say, "but I also learned that anyone can be part of the solution." His candor earned him respect, even from those who had once condemned him. The food blogger's book had become a bestseller, praised for its nuanced exploration of food, culture, and social justice. She had started a non-profit organization that provided media training to marginalized communities, ensuring that their stories would be told authentically. Her weekly column in the city newspaper had expanded into a nationally syndicated feature. The maitre d', now an industry leader in inclusive hospitality practices, had developed a training program that was being implemented in restaurants nationwide. Hospitality isn't about luxury, he would tell his trainees. It's about making every person feel valued. His protocols for ensuring equitable service had become industry standards. The documentary, A Seat at the Table, had won several awards and was being used as a training tool in hospitality schools. Its powerful message about transformation and redemption resonated with audiences worldwide. The filmmaker was now working on a series exploring similar stories of community change across the country. The Office of Business Equality had exceeded all expectations. Their certification program had spread to 15 other cities, creating a network of businesses committed to inclusive practices. The mobile app helping customers find certified establishments had been downloaded over 1 million times, demonstrating the public's desire to support ethical businesses. The couple's anniversary was approaching again, and this time, the entire city seemed invested in their celebration. Restaurants throughout the city offered special Anniversary of Change menus, donating a portion of the proceeds to scholarships for the Culinary Training Center. Their simple desire for an anniversary dinner had transformed into something far greater than themselves. The incident had sparked conversations about inclusion that extended far beyond the restaurant industry. Businesses of all types were examining their practices, asking themselves hard questions about unconscious bias and institutional discrimination. The wife students, now a grade level higher, still talked about that day. They had learned that speaking up against injustice could create real change. One student wrote in an essay, "Sometimes bad things happen so good things can grow from them, like flowers growing through cracks in the sidewalk." The construction company's expertise in creating welcoming spaces had led to a new division specializing in universal design. They consulted with businesses nationwide, helping them create environments that were physically and socially accessible to everyone. Their projects won several awards for innovative design that promoted inclusion. As Part 7 drew to a close, the city was preparing for the Unity in Hospitality Week's main event, a massive street festival celebrating food and community. Restaurants of all types would serve their specialties side by side, from street food to fine dining. The festival's slogan, suggested by one of the wife students, captured the spirit of their journey: "At the table of humanity, everyone has a seat." The Unity in Hospitality Week had arrived, transforming the city into a vibrant celebration of food, culture, and community. Streets were closed off for food stalls, cooking demonstrations, and community gatherings. The atmosphere was electric with the kind of energy that only comes when people unite for something bigger than themselves. The couple stood on the main stage during the opening ceremony, still somewhat amazed by how their experience had catalyzed such profound change. The wife wore the same blue dress from that fateful night at Le Petit Jardin, but this time it was a symbol of triumph rather than rejection. The husband's construction crew had surprised him with another new tie, this one emblazoned with tiny symbols representing unity and acceptance. "A year ago, we were turned away from a restaurant," the wife began her speech, her voice carrying across the crowded square. "Today, we stand before you not as victims of discrimination, but as witnesses to the power of community transformation." The crowd's applause was thunderous, punctuated by cheers from her students who had come with their families to support their beloved teacher. La Table de Two had set up an elaborate booth at the festival, serving not just French cuisine but fusion dishes that represented the city's diverse culinary heritage. Mr. Pierre worked alongside his staff, personally serving guests with a humility and warmth that would have been unimaginable a year ago. The line at their booth was the longest at the festival, not just for the food, but for what the restaurant now represented. The former chef's culinary training center had a special presentation area where her graduates demonstrated their skills. Each student shared not just cooking techniques, but stories of their journeys. Major restaurant groups were conducting on-site interviews, eager to recruit talent from this groundbreaking program. The air filled with the aromas of dishes from around the world as students showcased their heritage through food. The elderly civil rights attorney hosted a series of talk and taste sessions, where people could share meals and discuss their experiences with discrimination and inclusion. These conversations, once difficult and avoided, now flowed naturally as people recognized their shared humanity across the dinner table. Her legal handbook had become a cornerstone resource, cited in civil rights cases nationwide. The food bloggers' documentary crew captured everything, weaving together stories of transformation from across the city. They interviewed restaurant owners who had initially resisted change but now championed inclusion, customers who had found new favorite places to eat, and community leaders who saw their neighborhoods growing stronger through shared meals and understanding. The Office of Business Equality announced a groundbreaking initiative during the festival, a partnership with major credit card companies to create a rewards program for certified inclusive businesses. The idea had come from one of the wife students who had asked, "Why don't we give extra points for being extra nice?" The simplicity and brilliance of the child's suggestion had captured everyone's imagination. Mr. Pierre and the maitre d' led a panel discussion about their journey, sharing honest insights about the challenges and rewards of institutional change. "We lost some customers who didn't share our new values," the maitre d' admitted, "but we gained a community. Our regular customers now feel like family, and our staff comes to work with pride and purpose." The husband's construction company unveiled plans for a new culinary marketplace, designed with input from community members to be physically and culturally accessible to everyone. The project would provide affordable spaces for graduates of the Culinary Training Center to start their own businesses, creating a pipeline for diverse entrepreneurship in the food industry. The wife students had their own special role in the festival. They operated a kindness cafe where people could write messages of hope and inclusion on paper tablecloths. These messages would later be displayed in restaurants across the city, a reminder that wisdom often comes from the youngest members of our community. As evening approached on the final day of the festival, something remarkable happened. The couple was invited to finally have their anniversary dinner, not at one restaurant, but at all of them. They traveled from booth to booth, each establishment offering a special dish and words of gratitude for the changes their experience had inspired. The night culminated in a surprise announcement. The mayor revealed that the city council had unanimously voted to establish an annual scholarship fund in the couple's name. The fund would support aspiring restaurateurs from underrepresented communities, ensuring that the industry would continue to grow more diverse and inclusive. Standing under the festival lights, surrounded by the community that had turned their painful experience into positive change, the couple shared a quiet moment. "Did you ever imagine," the husband asked, holding his wife's hand, "that being turned away from dinner would lead to all this?" She smiled, watching their students teaching festival-goers the proper way to share meals from different cultures. "Sometimes the worst moments bring out the best in people," she replied. "We just had to be brave enough to stand up and strong enough to forgive." The festival ended with a community dinner that stretched for blocks, one long table where everyone was welcome. People who might never have met otherwise shared meals and stories, breaking bread and barriers simultaneously. The table settings were simple, but the atmosphere was rich with hope and possibility. As Part 8 drew to a close, the couple realized that their story hadn't really ended. It had evolved into something that would continue to grow and change lives. The incident at Le Petit Jardin had been like a stone thrown into still water, creating ripples that would travel far beyond their sight. Their ruined anniversary dinner had become a catalyst for change, proving that sometimes the most painful rejections can lead to the most beautiful acceptances. In the end, they had helped create something far more meaningful than a single evening celebration. They had helped build a community where everyone truly had a seat at the table.